The Seven Secrets of Somewhere Lake. Chapter 12. It's a conspiracy. The purple cloak of darkness still covered the world as we drove into the parking area at Point Imperial along the canyon rim, 65 miles east of the lodge. On the northeast horizon there was a soft gray glow, the first hint of morning, but elsewhere night reigned. We have expected to have the world to ourselves at this hour, but to our surprise, our headlights revealed a dilapidated old car of ancient vintage and uncertain make. No one was in it, and it presented a lonely, deserted appearance. "Looks like someone drove it this far and it wouldn't go any further," suggested Jenny. I felt the radiator and found it was quite warm, so it hadn't been long at the spot. The darkness ahead must hold our other visitors, doubtless on a mission like our own. We took our flashlights and cameras and followed the trail out to Point Imperial. There were two objects to this early morning trip: to see the sunrise from the vantage point, and to catch in our camera some record of these two eagles frequently seen here. Day comes rapidly once it gets underway. By the time we had reached the end of the trail, the world about us was taking form. In a cloudless northeastern sky, the advanced rays of the sun spread a golden glow halfway to the zenith. Far below, in a cradle of silence, lay the canyon, seemingly infinite in this indistinct lighting. A little stretch of the Colorado River was visible, its muddy waters now looking like a ribbon of gold in a rich hues borrowed from the heavens. All about us lay those awesome magnitudes which leave thought only one choice: to retreat into humanity and pray. "Listen," whispered Jenny, grasping my arm. From far towards the vanishing stars came a faint, persistent cry. "The eagles!" I exclaimed. "Yes, but there is another sound. Listen." Out of the shadows toward the edge of the canyon flowed a low, musical chant. It was of such positive rhythm that it seemed to be it must be paced by a tom-tom. The chant was composed of two blending human voices, one a high pitch and one of low. The effect of the strange sound was to deepen the wild beauty of our experience, and Jenny and I stood fascinated. Now the sun was peering over the horizon, the morning mist mellowing its rays so that we could look directly at it. We could see the serpentine course of the marble canyon through which the Colorado enters the Grand Canyon. In the purple distance to the south and east lay the other rim, fascinatingly highlighted in color and flame color. Beyond this, looking like a landscape on the moon, stretched the painted desert. The Hopi called it Asa Maunda, country of the departed spirits. The chant increased in tone and quickened in rhythm, punctuated occasionally by a little shout. It was coming from behind a huge rock. Jeannie and I made our way towards the spot, cautiously selecting each step, for here a miscalculation might lead to an unanticipated journey into the depths of the canyon. At last we were in position to peek around the end of the big rock. There we saw our new friends, John Corn and little Kona, at the very edge of the canyon. John was crouched down, Kona standing between his knees, both facing the rising sun, eyes closed while they chanted as if the words and tones came from their very hearts. It was an impressive scene, the grandeur of the landscape. Before us, the glow of the heavens, the eagles now plainly visible overhead, and these two children of nature voicing their appreciation in primitive sincerity. It was not until the ceremony had come to a natural close that the two Indians turned to walk back to the trail that they discovered us. "It was beautiful," exclaimed Jenny. "Beautiful. I hope you do not mind that we listened in." John was embarrassed, and Kona tried to get into his trouser leg. "You are a big surprise," said the Indian, endeavoring to free himself from the youngster who was clinging like a porcupine. "If you enjoyed our performance, we are glad, although we do it just for ourselves, to make us realize we are part of all of this." "A Hopi tribal chant?" I asked. "No, just ours. It belongs to Bohunk and me." "Could you interpret it for us?" asked Jenny. "That is, unless it is some secret you would rather not share." John laughed. "No secret," he said. "I will try to give you the meaning though such things seem so different in English than in Hopi. In your tongue, it would be something like this. Rise, O sun, symbol of the Great One. Bless your earth child with your light. Shine, shine, shine. Call the birds to singing. Call the trees and plants to growing. Call your people to work, O Great One. Keep their tongues straight. Keep their hearts true. Rise, shine, rise, shine. It is I, your child, O Great One, who calls. And strangely, John went on, smiling, when you sing those words at just the right time, the sun always obeys and comes up. Thank you, said Jenny warmly. Thank you for sharing such a precious thing with us. The way it all happened, it was a wonderful experience. Yes, this was an unexpected joy, I added. We had come for another purpose. I pointed overhead to the two eagles, which were quite plain. It is Kwahu, the eagle, declared John. Kwahu, repeated Kona, letting go his hold on his father's trousers and looking upward. Kwahu, Kwahu, he called. We returned to our cameras and focused the long-range lenses on the circling birds. They performed beautifully. Sometimes their effortless flight took them into the depths of the canyon. Then, rising on an invisible updraft, they would ascend into the clear blue sky overhead. They glided gracefully with never a flap of the wings. As they banked at certain angles, we could plainly see white tails and white heads, identification marks of the bald or American eagle. After many minutes, their circles took them towards the west. See, their circles are smaller, observed John. It may be that they are nearing their nest. Shall we go find it? Let's, Jenny agreed, unless it would be too much for little Chipmunk. Kona had recovered from his embarrassment and was holding on to her hand. I could see a close companionship evolving between these two. The round-faced youngster, whose eyes seemed to look at us from another world, was creeping into Jenny's heart, and she, with her keen understanding and love for children, was moving into his. Don't worry about him, John was saying. He will still be running circles around us when we are worn out. Under John's intuitive guidance, we went quite a distance through difficult country. Travel wasn't easy. It was a rocky, rugged land coated with cool forests of ponderosa pines and spotted with clusters of aspens. We held to the direction in which the eagles disappeared, and soon our efforts were rewarded. In the top of a leafless pine on the summit of a high, rocky ridge, we discovered their nest. Eagles mate for life, and year after year, the pair will return to the same nest. They will enlarge it with new material and strengthen it each season. The nest before us must have been long in the making, perhaps 15 years. Dry branches over an inch of thickness had been anchored securely in the crotch of a tree until a mass had accumulated over 12 feet in height. Perhaps it is possible to approach an eagle's nest without the sharp-eyed bird seeing you, but I have never been able to do it. That day, when we realized we were actually approaching the nest, we had tried every trick we knew. We covered the camera with dark cloth so no flash of light from the metal would be seen. We circled and came towards the nest tree with the sun at our backs. We kept to the shadows of trees and took cover back of bushes whenever possible. Kona was a star. He was so silent and so clever at concealing himself that only his father knew where he was most of the time. Yet with all our caution, long before we were within camera range, the huge birds had detected us and were uttering their alarm cries. They circled above the treetops, looking down at us, trying to determine what we were doing. How graceful and powerful they looked up there, their wings spread of fully 5 feet. We abandoned caution now and moved quickly towards the nest tree. Small wonder he is our national bird, commented Jenny. Where could you find anything that would suggest better the love of freedom and the determination to defend it than in an eagle? We kept watching the nest closely, quite certain that we hadn't seen all of this family. Our camera was recording the maneuvers of the two birds. Twice they dipped low over us, acting as if they meant to attack, but they did not. Eagles have been known to attack men in defense of their young, but only when their nests are being violated. Stories of the viciousness have been greatly exaggerated. Kona showed his utter fearlessness of the birds, walking right out into the open, holding up his hands and calling, "Quahu! Quahu!" He added some other words his father interpreted for me. "He is asking Quahu to come down and sit on his hand," he said. "Kona," laughed Jenny. "He wouldn't fit. You'd better get a canary." "He would even try to make it an ostrich, said his father, the bohunk. Curiosity is universally present in nature. Presently, we witness the effect of curiosity down on the eagle's nest. In spite of the warning cries of the parent birds, Junior came peeking over the side. He just had to see what all the shouting was about. He struggled until he was perched on the edge of the nest where he could get a good look at everything. His parents went wild. They scolded him and made bombing runs at him, but he stayed there just the same. Conan was so excited to see the little one, he jumped up and down and screamed. Eagle Jr. let out a few calls himself, just to be part of everything. I put the 6-inch lens on my camera and leveled it at him. That was more than the parent birds could stand. The thing looked too much like a gun for their comfort. One of the older birds, I could not tell whether father or mother, as they are identical in markings, took Junior to task. Scolding severely, the parent bird landed on the nest beside Junior and gave him as neat a spanking as I ever witnessed. The wings of the older bird came back on his back with force, and Junior realized that he had gone a step too far in defiance and disobedience. In the midst of a shower of blows, he retreated down into the nest, and we didn't see him again. We felt sorry for Junior, but what an opportunity he had provided for my camera. "Did you get all of that?" asked John. "I surely did," I answered, laughing. "I wouldn't take anything for that picture." We made our way back after this. Kona did tire and had to hitchhike a ride on his father's broad shoulders. It was near noon when we arrived at the old car belonging to our Indian friends. "Doesn't look like much," John commented, "but it gets us places, eh, bohunk?" Kona pulled his father down to his level and asked a question. John murmured something and looked up at us. Kona whispered more in his ear. John replied in his native tongue and then looked at us again. Kona demanded his ear again and looked to be almost at the point of tears. "Well," said John, "I'll ask them anyway. Kona wants to know if you would come to dinner at our camp. I tell him you have good food at the lodge and my cooking is not." "But we would love it," broke in Jenny. "Please let us come." "Would you really?" John's face brightened as he looked at us. "I would be happy to have you. Besides," he looked down at his boy, "besides, it is good for Kona to be with you. He sees so much of me. He needs other people, especially a woman." "His mother?" I started to question. "Gone," burst John with an emphasis that silenced any further inquiries in that direction. His eyes lighted with pain and the lines on his face deepened. "Could you have us tomorrow night?" I asked, retreating from the subject, which was apparently delicate, if not dangerous. "Yes, indeed," replied John, shaking himself out of the mood that had struck him so suddenly. "Come early. There is a white-tailed squirrel back of our camp, and you may be able to photograph him." Kona was asking something again now, and John had to stoop to him. There was an exchange of words in Hopi, then John said in English, "You ask him. You know how to say it. You ask him." Kona had to be encouraged, but at last he ventured these words. "You go down?" he asked, his eyes reflecting the question. "I go down where?" "You go down," he repeated with emphasis. "I go down?" "He wants to know if you're going down into the canyon. He wants to go along," John clarified things. I surprised the breath out of Kona by catching him up and giving him a mock spanking. "Don't you ask me that, you little bohunk," I said, shaking him while he giggled. "No, I am not going down into the canyon. Do you understand? And I don't want to be asked about it either." Kona caught the idea and also realized it had got him some extra attention to say, "You go down." So while we completed arrangements for our dinner at their camp, he kept peeking at me from behind his father. From behind our automobiles and from behind Jenny and from behind trees calling, "You go down?" The question always followed by a rivulet of giggles. This didn't end until his father packed him in his car and started away. And even when he stuck his beamy face out the window, he said, "You go down?" "What impression did you get about Kona's mother?" asked Jenny as we drove toward the canyon lodge. "I'm not sure," I replied, puzzled. John's reaction was strange, a mixture of sadness and anger. We had better leave the subject alone unless he opens it. Back at the lodge, it seemed to me that everyone had caught on to Kona's little joke. "It must have been thinking about your pictures, Mr. Campbell," said the manager. "It seems to me they wouldn't be complete unless you go down to the bottom of the canyon." "We have been thinking about it," I answered with a weak smile, and I didn't tell him what I had been thinking about it. I missed you," said the waitress who usually serves us. "Have you been at the bottom of the canyon?" I shook my head. "No, not yet, eh? Well, no doubt you will be going down soon." Well, if she didn't have any doubts about it, I did. The cabin girls, the bellboys, the bus drivers all thought I ought to go to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I had never had so many people interested in where I was to go in my life, and I didn't appreciate their attention. "But do you suppose we ought to go down there just for the experience?" asked Jenny. You too, Brutus," I replied. "Jenny, I do not want to go down in the canyon. Do you know how far it is? 14 miles to Phantom Ranch. 14 miles. You have to ride on a mule all the way." "Well," she persisted, "others have done it." "Yes, and when they come back, they can't stand up and they can't sit down. Jenny, I don't want to go down there. It begins with, 'I am not a rider.' I was raised in canoe country, and I'll handle one of those things as well as the next fellow. But I have been on horses only twice in my life, and I was sorry each time I got on one of the critters. I am not built for it, I tell you." "Don't you remember our rule for traveling?" she went on. "We are to ask ourselves a year from now, what will we wish we had done today? That has kept us from getting lazy and missing a lot of things." "All right," I said with finality. "I'll take you at your own words. A year from now, I'll be plentiful thankful I didn't go down into the canyon on a mule. So that settles it once and for all. I am not going to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and I hope I don't hear another word about it." There was a knock at our cabin door. A boy had brought an airmail letter from Hubbub and Tony. They wrote, "This is just a note to tell you all is well. Lots happening, and a long letter will be coming soon. We met someone in town who had been to Grand Canyon, and what do you think? He didn't go down to the bottom. He was afraid of the miles. We told him you would go down. Write us all about it. Greetings from Zipper, Zowie, Zany, Xenia, and the Seven Secrets. Sincerely, Hubbub and Tony." I finished reading this aloud and then looked at Jenny. "Mind if I laugh?" she asked, and whether I did or not, she did.